Welcome to The Gap, where it's our mission to bridge the gap between javelin and baseball training styles.
I'm Brett Hart, coach at Grind Athlete Performance and founder of Hitman Performance.
I'm Dan Labadia, javelin coach at Southern Connecticut State University and the man behind Jacked Javelin.
Hope you guys enjoy the show.
All right, so today on The Gap, we have Coach Kevin Foster from Javelin Anatomy joining us here in person. A year ago, we had him on over Zoom, and so much more intimate now, which we like around here. So, welcome to the show. How are you feeling?
Feeling good. Thanks for having me in here, and it's cool to see the studio setup you guys got.
I mean, for those of you who didn't listen to last year's episode, they were our first Zoom podcast episode. Kevin Foster and Mike Stein. Be sure to check that out, and if you watch till the end, you can see that we ran out of storage. And we had to finish with a FaceTime video. So hopefully now today we can actually get the full podcast in and hear what everything Kevin has to say.
But so as you guys know, I've talked about it probably 1,000 times in the 52 episodes we've had. But Kevin was my coach when I was in college. So, currently being 25, Kevin was probably around 24, 25 when he was my coach. So it's kind of cool to see this come full circle now, how we network together, we're friends. I learn a ton from Kevin still, even from this day. And so just really cool to see everything you've done for the javelin community at this point, and kind of revolutionizing the way that javelin is looked at online, especially, and also with a lot of your mobility stuff and some of these technical principles that weren't very popular 4 or 5 years ago. Now they have become much more mainstream due to the work that you've done. So my first question today is there anything that you taught me, 4 or 5 years ago that you've kind of gotten away from, that you've maybe changed your mind on or articulate in a different way now?
Yeah, so that's an awesome question, and I know you and I have talked about this before, and I think when I think about coaching in general, I think it's important to acknowledge that coaching philosophy should never be static. It's something that should continually be growing, and you should continually be refining how you think about javelin, think about training, think about throwing. And so with that said, I think when we were working together, it's like you said, I was probably 25 years old. It's 2019 through probably 2021, I think, that we were working together before you graduated and started your coaching career. And so when I think back to that time, that was when I started working with you. I started working with Scott Fuchs, who ended up being the one of my favorite stories of D3 baseball bench warmer to D1 All-American javelin thrower, which is awesome. And I think about how when I started working with you guys, even from the beginning of working with you to the end of working with you guys, I learned so much from the experience of our training time together. So just as an example, with you, Dan, you were the perfect example of why mobility is so important. And I know you were doing mobility ability before it was even released to the public. You were my guinea pig for mobility ability. And then I think about Scott, so many of the throwing concepts that I use now, he was kind of getting the beta versions of the cues and concepts that I was teaching. So with Scott, I remember, he was a 60-meter thrower when he started and was a 72-meter thrower by the time we stopped working together. And the process of teaching him his release was, okay, I'm watching what the elite throwers are doing with, a critical eye, trying to see, because I don't know if many people know this, but I have an exercise science background. So I'm a huge biomechanics nerd. So I know the human body, I know the joints, I know the muscles and all that stuff. So when I watch javelin, that's the lens that I look at it from. And so watching these throws, I was trying to articulate to Scott how to get in these same positions. And obviously learning from some other great coaches, I stole so much from so many coaches outside of javelin to articulate some of this stuff. But what the release mechanics for Scott boiled down to was ball of foot, squatty back foot contact, left side driver, and then dead arm, which I believe I taught you all those as well. So I remember that was kind of your foundation for throws too, but I kind of got that through articulating it to Scott. then working with you and realizing your mobility was kind of like a limiting factor, I realized, I can't teach javelin the same way with those same cues with the same success to you as Scott, which means there's something wrong with those cues. Wrong, right? And so the process of refinement from then to now has been this continual evolution of better articulating and better systemizing how I think about the javelin throw. So, right, just as an example, like, again, with like the release mechanics being, okay, like I boiled down release to these 3 concepts. I would have these ideas for crossovers. I had ideas for the rhythm and the speed, fluid deacceleration through the run up. And rather than looking at javelin as a collection of random cues and concepts and principles, I've kind of put it all together now in this very systematic way. So now I can literally rattle it off. Like, okay, I have the 8 phases of the javelin throw. There's the carry phase, drawback, crossovers, penultimate step, back foot contact, block plant, lay back position, then release and follow through. Each of those 8 parts of the throw has their core principles with it. So there's like the 8 phases of the throw, and then I have, okay, like the 8 big rock starting points of the throw. Stay on the balls of your feet, have active legs to the crossover, develop a fluid throwing motion before you try to cue your way to a good release. Like all these different things, right? So I have a system now, and that's like the biggest thing that I realized, talk about how evolving from working with Scott to working with you to then working with Mike and applying what I learned with Scott and you to Mike, then kind of starting that process over of, okay, well now Mike has just gone farther than all of us. Now what? And so it's like, okay, so now that stuff's not going to work for Mike. So now we have to go further. And so even when Mike and I started, I was teaching him a lot of the same. Okay, yeah, squatty back foot contact, left side driver, and dead arm. And that got him to 75 meters. But then what? So it's like, every step along the way of like 60, 70, 80 meters, you need a better way of looking at the throw, a more specific, intentional, systematic way of being able to critically analyze what's happening in the throw, where you can be precise and calculated and measured, rather than just being like, yeah, try this or try that. Put your arm somewhere over there. It's like, no, like put your arm and leg in this position at this moment in time, timed with this ground contact, and then from that position, do this. And it's like, that's how you get to the 80 meter level.
Yeah, and what's really cool too is that that's how you've kind of explained it to me. And Jordan last year, that was his first year just doing javelin, and so we worked a lot on just like the general athleticism and like the lower body mechanics, through med balls and developing arm power through plyo balls and just doing the full approach more. And what's really cool is that's like, that's what got him from 74 to 84. And then that's kind of like similar to where you're at with Mike now, where I feel like now that's like that process of with Jordan is now we're getting into the nitty gritty of like, your arm's got to be here, then like left foot is here at this point, and like all that type of stuff, and like working on the timing of it. So it's just like another prime example of like how, what I taught Jordan, obviously to get from 65 to 75 isn't what's going to get him from 75 to 85, and then now like to go beyond that to chase
85 to 95.
85 to 95 now is going to be like a lot of those nitty gritty positions in like the timing aspect and not just like the athletic aspect. Because that was, I think, our approach last year was like get more athletic down the runway in the throwing positions and in the donkey kick follow through, throwing through the point, stuff like that. And now it's like the athleticism is there. Now it's the technical refinement.
Reminds me of the meme. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Of like the road to benching 225. It's kind of like a straight line. But then the road to benching from 225 to 315. It's like a bunch of like different squiggly lines and like different roads you can follow. And there's going to be like hills, valleys, and like try to figure out like how the hell do I get to 315? Like it sounds like there, you get to a certain point where it's kind of like, all right, follow these steps, step by step by step, and then you hit it. You're like, all right, I ran out of things, so now I got to figure out how can I get to the next thing. And it's a lot of trial and error, which you've gone through and then gave to Dan. So like Dan gets to like get a little jump, like head start to like know like where to start, and then he has things to now learn of like, all right, now what can I do to get Jordan to throw further? What can I do to like Nevin? Like, is it like even a physical thing at this point? Is it more mental? Like stuff like that. So it's just you guys talking remind me of the meme.
Yeah, no, dude, that's awesome. And that's almost kind of what I was going to say, too, is, you realize that a lot of the issues you run into at some of the higher levels aren't actually javelin issues. It's, mindset maturity issues and clarity issues, organization issues. And, what I just described there of like, oh, yeah, my technical model has evolved so much. Well, the technical model's probably just a small percentage, right? I have a 5-pillar javelin system, and the technical modeling is just one of those 5 pillars. And so when I think about system as a whole, it's like your technical model can be spot on, but if your physical preparation isn't at the 80-meter level, it doesn't matter. If your goals aren't clear and you don't have a plan in place that's going to get you there, it doesn't matter. If your mindset is a victim mentality and you blame everybody else and you don't take responsibility for your actions, you're not going to get to the 80-meter level. And then you can have all that stuff in place, but if your system of drills sucks, then it's not going to happen. So it's like you need all that stuff in place. And if you don't have that mature, holistic, again, systematic, I use that word way too much now, but like that systematic approach, it's like you're not going to get there. And I think way too many javelin throwers look at everything just from the technical lens, and then even worse than that, they look at it from an oversimplified technical lens. So they're only seeing this much of the picture when there's this much more that needs to be addressed in their training.
So obviously, along with that, your following has more than doubled since we started working together. And you used to, you coached me pretty much in person. I was subscribed to your Patreon.
Throwback,
which is like, I just remember that was like the first time I think that subconsciously.
You're probably still giving me $5 a month,
yeah,
bro.
Yeah. But like subconsciously, I made that post about the informal versus formal education today, and like you're obviously probably one of the biggest pieces of my informal education. Because obviously I don't get a degree from working with you, but now what I do in my career, I use what you taught me like every day. And so that was huge return on investment there. Since then, right? So we worked, we're both from Connecticut, worked in person, subscribed to the Patreon. Then you had your remote clients like Scott, okay? And then you had your mobility ability program. Your following has doubled, your clientele has probably 10x'd, maybe even more.
Yeah.
And so where along the road did you see that system kind of being a little unsustainable? How did you make that pivot? And then where are you now?
Yeah, so that's an awesome question. And so, right, what you keep saying about, you had mentors and you invested in your, informal education. I had to reach out to coaches to learn how to run a javelin business and to learn how online coaching works and to learn how to organize and systemize stuff. So for me, the turning point was it would have been the beginning of 2023. I hired coaches to help me figure out how to run my business in a way that wasn't just scatterbrained and disorganized. And ultimately, what's funny is that through organizing my business, through organizing my Instagram page and gaining clarity over who I am and what I believe in and what I try to teach athletes, that helped me systemize my training system. So through becoming a better, Instagram page, through becoming a better business owner, through becoming, just more confident in what I believe in, that ultimately helped me become a better javelin coach. And so the transition, I think, is like, I can pinpoint that specific time, but I think just kind of like what you're getting at is like, you've noticed something has changed in how I run the page and how I run my coaching program. And so Obviously now I have like the Javelin Academy. I have the mobility ability program that people can join. I have javelin strength. I have the online courses and stuff now. So that's been like my biggest thing is just trying to find new ways to help people. But I couldn't do that unless I got it all together myself, unless I organized my stuff myself. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of been like the process.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at just kind of, like you talked about, like the disorganization, like how it might have, because it's starting off as like a small thing, and it is sustainable to do with a few people. But then when you start hitting like 20,000 followers on Instagram and starting to get, 25, 30 clients, it becomes harder to manage and stuff. And so, you pivoted from the Patreon page, which was mostly just like exclusive articles and stuff, correct? And then you go now what type of platform are you using now, and what do people get when they're a part of your new system?
Yeah, so I run the Javelin Academy group. It's a coaching program that's done through school. So shout out Alex Hormozy. I know you're into Hormozy. So school, it's like, I don't know how to explain it other than it's basically like a giant social media group where you have content, you have training programs, you have a calendar for group calls, and then one-on-one messaging with me. So I think a big part of the organization is also just finding the right platform for what you're trying to do. I think a lot of javelin coaches, well, I don't really know that many online javelin coaches other than, yeah, sir.
Nice to meet you.
But,
One of two.
Yeah. But it's like that, and that's like part of the thing though, is like you don't know what you don't know. So it's like, who do you turn to for advice about, hey, I'm running this, javelin coaching program online. Do you have any advice?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But I was lucky that the mentors that I found were they were really helpful and whatever. They gave me a lot of like generic advice, but get on school. That is a sick platform, and everybody that's in Javelin Academy loves it because there's a discussion board and you can interact with the other throwers, and it's cool. There's throwers from like over 10 countries around the world, which is pretty cool. And then like we get on group calls and you have training programs, so it's awesome. And so compared to just like before, it's like, yeah, I'd write you your program, we'd get on calls, but now it just feels like so many more gaps are filled, like in terms of like community and accountability, and you're part of something, and you have access to more training programs and plans and education. And like I have a whole like video course lined up in the Javelin Academy that just like lays out my 5-pillar system of, you learn about how to set goals, you learn about javelin mindset, you learn about physical prep, and you learn about technical modeling, you learn all the drills, and it's just like so much better when you have that level of education and clarity.
Yeah, and I use it even now still for my, like, because I'm in the school platform, and so even with me, like if I run into a question, I'll revisit it sometimes and just go look and see and kind of refine what I know. And actually, what I love what you said about the community aspect is like, we're both men of faith, and you were at one point searching for something greater than what's on this earth, right? And you found that in God, and so did I and stuff. And so we have that commonality as well. And I just relate that back to like when I was in college and I was working with you, I wanted so badly to just be like the best javelin thrower in the country, and to like have a training group or have a training partner that was on the same, level of dedication and understanding that I was. And I just didn't have that at Southern where I was. And I was like constantly searching for that community, just wanted to be around people that I was around. And then it wasn't until I was a senior, when everyone else on the team either had graduated or quit, and we didn't bring anyone new in until Nevin and Jordan got there. And then I was in charge of like setting the tone for how the culture was going to be at Southern, and I kind of had to change that. But I think it's just awesome that kids now have an outlet to join, like your online school community, to go be a part of something and get on those calls and get in the discussion board and get in there with a coach who like loves this stuff, right? Because here I was like no training partner, or like one training partner wasn't on the same level of dedication as me, and had no javelin coach. And so then it was just like I was always longing and searching for more. You know, I just know that if I was someone like Mike, for example, is training by himself, but because he has access to you every day and he has access to the community through school, he probably feels like he has a coach and he has a training partner and stuff. So I just think that's awesome, because it's like something that me, like, I didn't really have like a great training environment or atmosphere for like 2 years when I was like coming back from Tommy John and then going through that whole process. And then, like I said, it wasn't until like Nevin and Jordan came to campus when I was a senior that I really felt like I found my tribe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I cannot emphasize enough, like, you're not supposed to do this alone, and you need to find people on the same mission as you. And whatever, I understand if Javelin Academy is not going to be the thing for you, that's fine, but you have to find people. You need to have a group. You need to have people with the same values, on the same mission as you, because the reality is that you become who you hang out with. And, you know, like you alluded to, you know, it was the end of 2022. I got back into church, and I found a great group of people through my church down in Charleston, and that corresponded perfectly with the huge transformation that happened in the beginning of 2023 with the business that happened with me in figuring out my coaching career, who I am and what I stand for, and just all of it. So I just cannot emphasize enough, like, you need a tribe, man. You need one. You absolutely need to find your people.
Yeah, Louis Simmons, iron sharpens iron. Yeah, those West Side guys probably would have never did those lifts that they set and the records that they had if it wasn't for, like, all the people they had. Like, their gym was probably the size of this podcast room. They had no fancy equipment or anything. They had bands, a barbell, a lot of weights, a lot of chains, and they just got after it every single day. So finding a training partner or a group, like, I think that's just huge for anyone in any type of athletic development. Like, I agree. Like, you'll definitely become who you surround yourself with. So if you surround yourself with people that aren't going to even come close to the goals you want, then you're going to have to find another group. I think it happens with a lot of high performers that you get into that lonely period. And shout out Hermosi, because he talks about this too. It's like when you start to make a change for yourself and you're going to outgrow the current friend group that you have, and then you're not good enough to be with, like, the next level that you want. Like, you're kind of in that middle ground where you're going to be, like, alone, but now that you have other people in a group that you don't really feel that, but you still might. Like, that's just where you have to actually double down on everything that you're doing and have that clear vision, have that goal in mind, and you're going to try to do something that 99.99% of people will never achieve or never do. So you got to make that a huge point in your life of, like, that's what you're going to go for.
Yeah, and don't idolize the lonely chapter, because that's something a lot of people do is, I'm just a lone wolf, man. I don't need people. I'm better when I'm by myself because other people hold me back. It's like, okay, then you're just with the wrong people. You got to find the right people. It's easier than ever now. Easier than ever. Mike found his people before he found me on Instagram, Mike Stein. Like, he would just DM random people, and then he eventually connected with Scott, who connected him to me. And it's just like, you have a world at your fingertips. Like, make use of that. You have to. You have, what, like you said, Louis Simmons, the best lifters in the world, best javelin throwers in the world. They all have a community or a track club or something. It's like, why would you be different sitting with a 58-meter PR or something? It's like, why do you think you're the one that can do this alone? I know. I tried to pick a number that wasn't your PR. I had to think for a second. I started because I was like, oh shit, what stands PR again? I don't want to. I want to make sure I'm not calling anybody out, but I want to make sure I'm calling everybody out.
No,
because it's like, oh man, dude.
There's an asterisk next to that 60.
You got 60 in there. It's still there. He's not retired. This is his prime still. He can still bang it out. So we'll switch gears a little bit, and we'll talk about, like, the content within, like, Javelin Academy and what you have to offer and stuff. Because I think, like, for me being from, like, a baseball side, I do think that baseball players can benefit not only from a group but from the javelin style of training of what you guys have to offer. So going into more of, like, an injury reduction standpoint, like javelin's a very explosive movement. It kind of seems like Tommy John's a prerequisite to throw far. Like in a lot of baseball players, they're throwing harder than ever. The average velocity in the league just keeps rising, but so does all UCL injuries or low back strains or some type of hamstring pull. So what do you program for like any given athlete, whether they're in season or off season? How does it differ? How does it not? And just trying to manage all that stress on the body.
Yeah, no, so that's an awesome question. So as far as injury prevention goes, we're all mature adults here, and we can hold two ideas simultaneously and say we can recognize that injuries, they happen. They can be out of your control, for sure. Freak accidents happen, or, when you're at the high level, like, there's a lot of force involved in a high velocity throw or a far javelin throw. But on the other side of the coin, we also have to recognize that injury happens when it's a simple equation, when more force goes through a body part than that body part can handle. So if your UCL snaps, it is because it was unprepared for the amount of force that went through it. Obvious, right? But there are things you can do to mitigate that. You can strengthen the arm. You can create more mobility and create better connection through the body so that there's a better buffering system of force. And that combination of stronger structure plus more mobility will protect your body. And so you have to recognize that taking preventative steps is critical. You might still get injured, so right, you have to not like fear monger over it, but you have to be mature about taking those steps. But so specifically to answer your question, my philosophy for injury prevention revolves around those physical qualities. So just as the example of preventing arm pain specifically, right, UCL injuries, we can see that the elbow is the last link of the kinetic chain in the throwing motion. And so when the elbow is, taking on too much force in the throw, 9 times out of 10, it's not an elbow problem. It's a shoulder problem, a scapular problem, a spine problem, a hip problem, or just a general like athleticism problem. So that's where, for me, mobility becomes the biggest game changer for injury prevention, because you're going to develop fluidity and range of motion through the kinetic chain. And then ultimately that fluidity and range of motion is going to translate to better, I just kind of say elasticity through the body. It's going to connect the body better through tension. So if your hips can't rotate and your spine can't rotate, you can't get a good layback with your scaps, and you're still cranking a throw as hard as you can. Well, if the only thing that can move is your shoulder, but even your shoulder's still a little tight, then that's going straight to the UCL. Like, there's no getting around that. So by creating that buffer system, okay, if I can get my shoulder to rotate a little bit better, if I can get my spine to rotate a little bit better, segment each vertebrae in the spine better, get more extension, create a less stiff chest, internally rotate the hip better, it's like that is going to protect the arm better than any arm care exercise that you could do. But then you can also say, well, you look at somebody like Johannes Vetter, who's, granted, I think he did just have elbow surgery, so, like I said, things happen, but it's like, you can get big and strong and muscular, and that muscle serves as armor as long as you are still mobile and flexible. So it's like just taking that approach of like, okay, you can build armor and you can build mobility, strong structure, good range of motion. It's like, that is like, probably like 90% of like the injury prevention protocol for me. But then the last 10% is all like whatever, like the red light therapy stuff and like, really specific targeted prehab exercises. And then you ask, does it change at all through in season versus off season? Not really. I think the biggest thing, so not really a method, but just like a principle, is just load management, is probably like, that is even higher than the like methodology of trying to like prepare the body. It's like, as long if you take risk reward seriously and manage your load and progress your throwing volume and intensity in a calculated, measured way, probably like 99% of arm injuries wouldn't happen in the same way. Because there's a lot of arm injuries, so I feel confident with the 99%, but there will be exceptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, understand that injuries tend to happen. Like, no matter what you do, you can have a perfect program, sleep 8 to 10 hours every night, take your creatine, do your red light, but you can still pop your elbow or pull a hamstring or something. Just, it's what happens. I know Jake Turra, we were talking about him before. He had like that quote, was like, if you never want to get hurt, just don't leave your couch.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like, if you want to do cool stuff, you got to take the risk for it. Like, the risk reward of like wanting to be a high level javelin thrower, want to be a high level baseball pitcher. Like, something's going to happen at one point in your career. But then I think that's where you can take that and learn from it and like see where it was, where that inefficiency did stem from. Because usually, like I was saying, it wasn't just the elbow. It was probably something else you can use to level up the system if you want to use that. Like, figure out where, like, in that kinetic chain, it was off.
So with the injury stuff, you were talking about how you don't really change it in season versus off season and how you kind of systemize that. So going off of the mobility stuff and the strength, when you program for your athletes, how does that change off season versus in season? Because I know you're not a huge fan of just linear periodization, which, for those of you who don't know, that's essentially like starting with a hypertrophy phase and then going to a submaximal strength phase and then going to a max effort phase and then a power phase and then a speed phase and then peak, whatever you want your power phase or speed phase to be, would be like the same week as your championship meet or whatever your biggest meet is for the year. So, that's how most college strength coaches, and I would just say most strength coaches in general, do it. So you're not a huge fan of that. So tell us why and what you do instead.
Yeah, so to answer the first question, I'm not a big fan of linear periodization for a few reasons. So number one is when you are focusing on strength phase, hypertrophy phase, whatever, and it depends on how you do it. So there's good ways to do it, bad ways to do it. It just kind of depends. But I see a lot of room for ignoring other athletic qualities. So if you're focusing super hard on a hypertrophy phase, then, well, are you still, running? Are you still jumping? Are you hitting some of those nitty-gritty muscle groups that wouldn't necessarily be like hypertrophy muscles? Like when I think about like a hypertrophy phase, or when, maybe more important, when the high school junior thinks about a hypertrophy phase, they're thinking like, okay, I got to get the big chest, get the big lats, get the six pack, and hopefully they're doing leg days. But it's like, to me, when I think about javelin strength specifically, javelin strength doesn't require I want to say this the right way. You don't have to be amazing at any specific lift. You don't have to be amazing, like bodybuilder style physique, like Vetter as the example. You just have to be good enough across the board, and getting good enough across the board is really easy in the grand scheme of things. And I say good enough like with a hefty grain of salt. So that's like the first part of like, you don't have to be able to squat 500 pounds. You just have to be able to squat 315 for like a few easy reps. You don't need to bench press 400 pounds. You just need to bench press 315. You don't need to
say like two.
I would say
250.
two. If it depends on what level you want to be at, but I say like if you can bench press 225 for, just say five reps, that is good enough to throw 70 meters. I'm very confident in that.
Yeah.
And that is good enough for most people's goals.
Yeah.
And once you hit the 70 meter mark, then we can talk about the 315 bench press. So that's kind of like, that's a big part of it. Is like you just have to make sure you keep the goal by prioritizing the things that matter. Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm in my hypertrophy phase, so I have to like, you're showing up to your throwing session sore as crap because you're like, I had to hit my German volume training in order to, and then you're like, oh, well, I gotta, whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like good examples, but like instead of doing mobility, you're eating 10,000 calories or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's a stupid example. I understand that's a stupid example, but it's just like the prioritization of everything needs to be in place in my mind. And I think that that's something that gets lost sometimes when you take a very, I don't know. I think it goes hand in hand with a little bit of a meathead mindset. The other part, and this is kind of the second part to your question, is like, what do I do instead? Is I love to have like it's called like a concurrent periodization scheme where you're just doing a little bit of everything all the time, all year round. And is that what Brett does?
I know, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
he does the he does the Will Rattel concurrent program all the
The
time.
Hoss.
Dude, sick.
Yeah.
It's really good. I
Yeah.
like it a lot.
Yeah, and so I really like the concurrent style of training where you're doing a little bit of everything all the time, all year round. And rather than trying to peak at a certain time, the goal is just to be on this slow and steady upward trend. Oh, yep. Slow and steady.
Upward.
All the way. Upward. Shout out upward.
No. Cut that out.
And I think that what happens is so many people worry about peaking that they don't ever just focus on getting as good as they can get across the board at everything all at once, which that sounds like almost too good to be true, but my experience is that if you program in a way that manages fatigue, you cycle exercises in and out instead of just focusing on, hey, I want to get my squat up as high as it can. What I'll do is week 1 on the program is a back squat to a box below parallel. The next week is a front squat full depth for higher reps. The next week will be, a super heavy box squat to above parallel with a wider stance than normal. Then the 4th week will be pistol squats to a low box. And it's like, okay, well, the weeks 1 and week 3, those are very like neurologically focused. You're focused on boosting the nervous system, boosting that raw output. Weeks 2 and 4 are focused on building structure. 2 very different kinds of fatigue. So rather than taking a deload every 4th week or something like that, you're just using that week 2 to recover from week 1 and the week 3 to recover from week 2. And everything's kind of getting a break as you go through it. And we're not pushing to the absolute limit anyway. So there's always a little bit left in the tank. So it's like you're never crushing yourself, but you're pushing to a hard enough level on lifts across the board through a wide variety of variations that you're hitting all these nooks and crannies in these muscle groups, in these joints, in these movements that a lot of people go through the javelin strength stuff and they're like, dude, I've never done like most of these movements before. It's like, yeah, that's the point, because you're working new muscles, you're working new movements, and it's like, that is the point. So that's where I don't think there's anything massively wrong with linear periodization. I just sometimes think there's a better way depending on who the athlete is. And I think there absolutely are athletes where linear periodization, you need to focus on the hypertrophy phase for 4 months out of the year. You need to build strength out of that hypertrophy phase. I think there's a learning curve that's kind of built into a program like that, where it's like, if you've never lifted before, if you have never lifted through a good program before, it's like there's so many gains you can get strength-wise through that. And I think there's a lot of athletes that, right, they'll hear me talk the way I am right now. They'll be like, oh, Kevin's saying strength doesn't matter. It's like, no, strength absolutely matters, but you have to just make sure you're building it in a good way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think that like the way in my personal coaching experience, the way that I've come to find it is that someone like a Jordan Davis, like peaking for him, I think it would help because he is very good at running, jumping, monitoring. Like he's very good at just monitoring fatigue in general. Like he's, seemingly always feeling fresh, right?
Yeah.
Throwing wise, very good technique, has great mobility. Someone like him, I feel like linear periodization would hypothetically help him. Someone that you just need to get better at throwing, like you're, say you're below, like we'll call it 70 meters. You can't let chasing that like 500-pound squat get in the way of
Yeah.
your javelin goals. You know what I mean? I think so basically what I'm saying to sum it up is I think linear periodization will help the person who's already elite, who like knows how to throw effectively at that lower intensity when they are going through like a hypertrophy phase and like knows the time of year, can actually work up to like something like above 80 meters and stuff like that. We don't need to spend a whole 3-month period working on the dead arm and how to use the kinetic chain and how to use your spine and hips for the first time. So like if I get a kid like that where they're like so muscle bound where they literally don't know how to do the dead arm drills, the figure 8 drills, they have no hip shoulder separation, they struggle with mobility, like stuff like that, linear periodization is not gonna help that person. You got to take so much time and effort in the throwing stuff. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I totally do. And I actually almost I think that even the opposite of what you're saying is also true of like the guys who are already elite. I agree with what you're saying with Jordan for sure, but then I think about Jordan kind of in the beginning of his career where like the story was like his doctor told him he like couldn't squat or something.
Yeah, because he had the car accident.
Yeah, and you had to like rebuild his strength from
Yeah.
basically nothing.
Yeah.
And he needed that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think that is a massive part of the success that he's built on top of that foundation. And so it's like, okay, you know, on one end of the spectrum, Jordan needed that at the beginning, and now Jordan needs it where he's at now.
Yeah.
And like, I think there's a lot of people who they don't realize how weak they are. Where I think what you're saying of like a lot of the stuff, well, I can't really like dead arm very well. Well, it's hard to turn off a muscle that isn't there in the first place. I don't know. There's something to be said for just like that athleticism that comes from being a muscular athlete. So, I mean, I think there's absolutely a time and a place for tons of different athletes to like work through something like that.
And not every year has to look the same either.
Right.
I think that's a huge part of it as well. I look at Nevin as someone who like his first 3 years, I think mentally he needed to just like catch up, you know? And I think that like just being in the weight room and just buying into the sport and just gaining muscle mass and becoming like more of an alpha male and becoming like just more bought into the sport, I think that was like a huge part of it. And that's kind of like an underrated aspect as well of like the look good, feel good type of thing that comes from like really just like dominating the weight room. But like now Nevin's like a 350 bench, over 300 clean, over 500 squat. Like he did 405 for 10 in squat the other day. It's like dude, he's just built like a brick house where you can just see like he's just anatomically, Nevin is just built to squat. You know? Now it's to the point where like he could very easily like maintain that strength from now until the spring and just like dialing in, you know, things like maybe the pistol squat and like doing more of the athleticism, like the bounding and the running and the jumping, and like continuing to work on like a lot of the dead arm stuff and the spinal segmentation. It's like that's where like for me, that's what I don't like about linear periodization for a lot of people, is because they'll put so much focus on the weight room and then they're in there for 2.5 hours, and then like you said, it takes away from everything else. They show up to their throwing sessions super tight and immobile, like more injury prone, like because of the lack of load management, and then that's when it starts to take away from the throw. And so I know I was really guilty of that, where like for me, I just remember being, even like when I was 23 2 years ago, going into my, you know, my grad school year, of being like, all right, like February I got to max out all my numbers. I got to make sure like I'm hitting like at least like a 450 squat and like over 315 bench, like otherwise I'm not going to be able to throw as far this year. And just like mentally being hung up on that and kind of like putting my throwing training on the back burner during the winter time. And I just remember feeling like, yeah, like I have to hit these numbers, otherwise like if my numbers drop by like 5 or 10 pounds, like my throw is going to tank. Yeah. And it's just like that mindset for me was so backwards, where it's like that's not what I needed more of, you know. But obviously you learn from it.
It's funny hearing you guys talk about like these numbers, like 450, 315. Like, I got a lot of athletes that, like, we're just focused on getting 10 good push-ups in.
Yeah.
Like, doing 5 pull-ups or 5 chin-ups, like, body weight, like, full dead hang at this bottom and pull yourself up. Because the population I'm working at in the private sector is 99% baseball or softball. And most of them are, like, 14, 15, 16 years old. So a lot of these people, like, all these kids want to push, like, really heavy weight. But you watch them run, you watch them jump, you watch them just do anything like that seems very basic, and they just can't do it. Like, they can't hold a split squat iso for 20 to 30 seconds without falling over, losing their balance. They can't bound properly. They can't, like, do an A skip without going opposite arm, opposite leg, which we talked about in the last episode of our throwing series with, like, the plyos and jumps. So, like, if you're a high school athlete just listening to this, I think it's just consistency and depositing pennies for these next 4 years until you get to college, so you are at a much higher standpoint when you can get into, like, this nitty-gritty talk of, like, pushing the envelope, getting into that next level. But don't expect to be training like Jordan Davis at 15, 16 years old. Like, you had one of your high school athletes talking about, like, the fast twitch, like, quickness stuff. Like, dude, you're just not there yet. Like, like, the squat your body weight for a couple reps first, like, then worry about, like, the fancy stuff. And I think social media plays into a huge factor of that as well. Like, you see, like, high level athletes doing stuff like Seedman, I think, is probably the best example of kids wanting to try really goofy stuff that we know that is just for Instagram likes and comments. But, like, for a high school kid, like, you gotta just be really good at the basics first before you can't just skip steps. You can't skip levels. Like, you have to go through that process and come out the other side of, like, then looking for, like, some type of exploration and trying to find what can be the next thing that can push you forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I think that you just said what I was trying to say a minute ago, of just, like, there's athletes that really just need to know what a squat is before they can squat 450 or do, the oscillating fast twitch, like, whatever stuff. It's, like, spot on.
Now, since we're on the topic of strength, right? So a big thing that I've implemented the last year, I've talked about it a lot on the show, and that's actually the biggest difference between Strong and Mobile, my first program, all in the bilateral stance. The new program, Fast Twitch, is what I took a lot from the baseball community, is working a lot in that split squat lunge position, right? In your mind, what transfer of power and energy, is there a difference there? Do you see a difference in a correlation with the split squat in your athletes and your training versus the bilateral stance, or how do you view that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily say I categorize things as bilateral, unilateral. I think the big way that I frame mobility in general is joint to joint, like, hyper-specific ranges of motion. So, like, when I talk about positions in the throw, it's like, okay, you hit your block position, your left leg is going to be in flexion and internal rotation. You have to kind of eccentrically load into the left glute is technically what's happening there. The right side is hip internal rotation from a deep knee bend position. You could say, okay, there's, like, that isometric 90-degree knee angle, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can get super nitty-gritty with it. And then you say, okay, well, rotation is going to be, the weight transfer of the pelvis. You're kind of, there's all kinds of crazy words for pelvis motion, but you're loading into that left side pelvis. The spine is segmenting through extension and then rotation. And then when you hit the block, it's the opposite motion through flexion and the scap retraction. Every joint has its range of motion that it moves through, and it all has, there's ways to measure it and categorize it. And so when I think about mobility positions, I look at the position that we're trying to get the transfer to, and then I break that down into joint motions first. So you build the specific joint capacity. So before I think about the thrower stretch, right, in the original mobility ability, the 3-month, I call it the Foundations program now. In that program, in the beginner phase, you don't even do the 6 benchmark positions that I have, because before you start talking about the benchmark positions that are going to transfer to your throw, you just have to get your joints in positions that are capable of even getting into the benchmark positions themselves. So, like, before I think about how am I going to get my mobility to transfer to the block, okay, well, sure, the thrower stretch, but what is the thrower stretch made of? Okay, we need hip flexion, hip internal rotation, spinal extension. the split stance stability. So there is an element of like, okay, yeah, unilateral coordination. There's different foot positions and postures that you have to work through there. But the way that I think about it is just like layering on specific joint range of motion, what joints need strength, range of motion, through what ranges of motion. Then how can you combine them all together and coordinate them in ways that are going to hit positions that will transfer to the throw. So kind of like isolate, then coordinate. You go from like very, general, right? You think about hip internal rotation. It's like, how does that relate to the throw? Well, okay, just rotating your hip it's not the same as throwing, but it's a key part of throwing. So it's like you go from general to specific, isolated to coordinated, and just kind of taking that kind of framework of just like, really analyzing the crap out of it.
Yeah. I'm going to have to listen back to that and analyze that. I'm going to have to take notes on that. I mean, I'm getting a free course right now. We put it on the show for everybody.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, in the S&C world, like just on Instagram or Twitter, but like I know Mike Boyle and his crew of people bash any type of bilateral movement. They hate the back squat. They say they do trap bar deadlifts, but they take it out like every couple months. Mm-hmm. And they're all about like, we change his mind every couple months, but now they're all about like the pistol squat, the single leg squats. He was about RFEs for a while. It was on his book. Now I just went to a conference. He said he doesn't like RFEs anymore. I don't know. But seems to be always a debate of like what's...
Talking about Bulgarian?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But like there seems to just be a constant debate of like what's better, unilateral versus bilateral. I think you should be good at both. But I don't know if like the javelin world has any type of different say in it.
Yeah, well, so the javelin world is not my opinion. Mm-hmm. But like when I think about even what you're saying, like, well, you just got to be good at both. I don't even look at it in that framework because then you turn into the Mike Boyle. And I hope he doesn't watch this because I like Mike Boyle. But you think Mike Boyle's tuning in on this?
Probably not.
If it's on Twitter, he will.
It's on Twitter. But so...
I think Darian Barr's logging in, though.
I forgot about that. Here.
So, like... What you're saying with Mike Boyle of like, well, he has to change his mind every few months because he's locked himself into this super narrow system where he only thinks about things in terms of, well, am I doing this exercise or that exercise? Which exercise is better? Which unilateral or bilateral? It's like, it doesn't matter, but that is too general of a word. What is happening in the body, in the movement that you're trying to get it to transfer to, and how are you going to train in a way that's specific to that movement? So you need, all of the argument about it is irrelevant until you have something that you're applying it to. So like, if you're just Mike Boyle, like, I think he trained hockey players or something. It's like, okay, well, he makes a valid case because, back squatting, 99% of hockey players have FAI, so back squatting is going to tear their hips up. It makes sense for him to have that. It makes sense. Whereas, random people arguing on Instagram, they're personal trainers. They don't have something that they're applying it to. You have baseball, you have javelin, so you have like things where you can think through rationally. But for me, the way I think about it, I don't care about unilateral, bilateral. I care about what is happening in the movement itself that we're training for, and what are we going to do about it to adapt in a way that will make us really, really good at that thing.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Sick, dude. Yeah. I was just curious about your opinion because I just know that that pops up on my feed constantly. It's either that or Olympic lifts or trap bar jumps. But I feel like strength and conditioning coaches get bored a lot.
I think all the same irrelevant discussion, just flavored differently every single month.
I think we just get bored. And I just got to find something to talk about.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I started hitting people with the spaghetti emoji.
Right?
No, I'm being serious though, because like, I give you credit, man. You're what, 5-6 years into Javelin Anatomy, so you've been dealing with the Instagram comments on technique.
I've never dealt with hate in my life.
That is not true. But like, you've been dealing with it for like 5-6 years. I'm 1 year in. I've had it up to here. I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna confuse these people from now on, and then just like I have so much fun with it. But yeah, I think that brings us home though. And then on that note, real quick, take the last like couple minutes. Is there anything new that you're coming out with that you want the people to be excited about? I know you released your mental framework today, the 80-meter mindset. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, and then any plans you have for the future.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate you guys having me on. I think, the big thing that I just want to like emphasize is, there's resources out there now between my stuff, your stuff. I just like encourage everybody to join something, like be a part of this, because, the javelin training is changing. I think you and I can both agree on that. There are resources that are free, cheap, expensive, right? Just you can get on something and get the guidance that you need to get to the level that you want, and just invest in yourself. It's worth it every time. So like, right, I have my free ebook that just came out today, the Javelin Mindset. I have I think we both have free ebooks out. It's like, download those. I've got a 10-day javelin course that goes through, I was talking about the technical modeling stuff earlier in the podcast. It's like, get on the 10-day course. Javelin Academy, reopening that for enrollment in December. Mobility Ability is always open. You can join that anytime. So resource for anything that you're working through. Just DM me if you have questions. But otherwise, nothing new. It's cool. Just pumping out the stuff for the content, man.
Keep on keeping on.
Yep.
We find joy in the mundane.
Yeah.
Is that how we're ending?
All right. Insert the wet spaghetti emoji, and we'll call it a night. All right.
Thanks, Kevin, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys.